Welcome to Lesson 3 of Animated Loops. In this lesson, we're going to animate our red character in a bouncing loop. This will show how to create a very short loop using a lot of overlapping smooth motion. Let's get started. Before our character can bounce, we need to give them something to bounce on. So let's create a trampoline. We'll start with the shadow layer, which is going to become the trampoline shadow. Make this bigger, 490 by 90 pixels. Then duplicate the shadow layer and name this trampoline ring. Move the position of this above the shadow. Change the fill color to light blue and give it a stroke 20 pixels wide, the same color as the fill. Then duplicate the trampoline ring and name this trampoline ring front. Move this layer up just below all of the null layers. Solo this layer so we can see what we're doing. We don't want a fill, just a stroke. We're going to add trim paths to this because we only want to see the bottom half of it. Set the end of the trim to 50%. Change the offset to 90 degrees to rotate it around to the bottom, and also give it a round cap, just to smooth out the ends. Name the ellipse within this layer top. Duplicate that and name it side. Move side below top. We're going to make the side layer a darker shade of light blue. Move the position of the side ellipse path 1 pixel lower. Then add a repeater to the side shape. Make 18 copies of this. In the repeater transform, we just want it to move 1 pixel in the vertical position only. This gives a 3D style edge to the front of the trampoline. Next, we'll create the trampoline legs. We'll do this with the rounded rectangle tool. Double click that. Change the size of the rectangle to 20 pixels wide and 90 pixels high. Make sure the roundness is at least 20, so the rectangle has a round end. We don't want a stroke, just a fill, the lighter shade of blue. Name this layer legs front. Move the horizontal position of the rectangle shape within the layer to 175. Duplicate the rectangle and change the position of the copy to -175. Move the legs front layer below trampoline front. Move the position down so it looks like they're attached to the front edge of the trampoline. Duplicate legs front and name this legs back. Move this layer down just above the shadow layer. Change the scale to 75%. And move the position up so it looks like they're attached to the back edge of the trampoline. Now we'll create the middle part of the trampoline, which is the part that our character will be bouncing on. Duplicate trampoline ring and name this trampoline middle. We don't want a stroke, just a white fill. Change the size to 420 by 55. We don't want the middle part of the trampoline to be a perfect ellipse. We need it to bend and stretch. To do this, open up the ellipse inside the layer, select the ellipse path, right-click, and select Convert to Bezier Path. And this changes it to a shape made of points, which we can then move around to deform it. We don't want it to bounce with a uniform curve though, so we'll add 2 more points to the shape. Drag out a guide from a ruler, just to help make sure that the points we're adding are symmetrical. Select the Add Vertex tool, and click the shape path to add 2 more points where the guideline intersects it. And we can get rid of the guide now. Now we can animate a less uniform shape when we are bouncing our character. we'll need to create a separate layer for when the trampoline stretches down. Duplicate trampoline middle and name this trampoline middle down. Set the vertical scale to -100. Parent that to trampoline middle. Move the layer up just below legs front. Change the color to a very light grey because this is under the trampoline in shadow. Then duplicate trampoline ring and move this above trampoline middle down. Name this trampoline ring matte. We don't want a stroke for this, just a fill. Then set trampoline middle down to use the above layer as an inverted alpha matte. We did this because we want it to be the shape stretching below the trampoline, which should only be visible below it, but layered above our character. Now we can delete our colour palette. And we'll also create a null to control the position of the trampoline. Duplicate character null and name this trampoline null. Copy and paste the position from one of the trampoline ring layers. Then parent all of the trampoline layers apart from trampoline middle down, but including the shadow, to trampoline null. Then we can use this null to move the trampoline lower near the bottom of the frame to give our character more room to bounce. And we can use our character null to move the character near the top of the frame, which will be the starting point of our animation. Like with lesson 1, we're only going to animate using a short section of the timeline. Again, let's start at 2 seconds. Drag out a marker and name this start. Press B to set the beginning of the work area. We're going to make a 1 second loop, so move to 3 seconds and drag out a marker for the end. And go 1 frame back, then press N to set the end of the work area. And now we can start animating. Select the character null and right click on the position. Then click Separate Dimensions, because we only want to animate the Y position of the character. Set a keyframe on the Y position at the start of the animation. 10 frames later, move the position down so the character is standing on the trampoline. This is going to be the contact point of the bounce. 10 frames after that, copy and paste the keyframe we just made. This is going to be the release point of the bounce. Then, at the end, copy and paste the start keyframe to put the character back in the air. At the midpoint of the animation, we want the character to be dropping through the trampoline slightly. Select the middle, start and end keyframes and set these all to Easy Ease. This doesn't look great yet because we need to do some work in the graph editor. Select the Y position property and open the graph editor. Make sure we're looking at the value graph for this. And in the visibility, you can just have Show Selected Property selected. Then we can adjust the handles on each of these keyframes to smooth out the curve of the graph. We want the start and end to have quite a flat curve, which will make our character hang in the air at the top of the bounce for longer. The middle can be more pointed to have a quicker bounce off the trampoline. Then use the Convert Vertex tool to adjust the contact and release points, making them steeper so the movement is faster. The curve should be smooth and roughly symmetrical. Now the movement should be much better. Let's go back to the contact point and close the graph editor. Now we'll go down to the trampoline middle layer to animate the trampoline bouncing when the character hits it. First, we'll animate the position. Again, separate the dimensions of this. Set a keyframe on the Y position at the resting point here. 5 frames later, at the bottom of the bounce, move it lower, but not past the bottom of the trampoline. 10 frames after that, move it up, near the top edge of the trampoline. And 5 frames after that, move it slightly lower than the original resting position. copy and paste the end keyframe to the start. Then, 5 frames after that, move it slightly above the original resting position. For every keyframe besides the contact point, add easy ease to them. We also want to animate the scale of this to help it look stretchier. Set a scale keyframe at the contact point at 100%. 5 frames after that, reduce the scale to 95%. 5 frames after that, it passes through the resting point again, so set the scale back to 100. And 5 frames after that, at the top, scale it back to 95%. At the end frame, set it back to 100. Then for all of these keyframes apart from the first one, set these to easy ease. Now we'll animate the path shape to be even more stretchy. Starting with trampoline middle down, add a path keyframe at the contact point. 5 frames later, pull the path point down to stretch the trampoline in the middle. The middle can be quite flat because it needs to contain the feet. Try to keep the shape symmetrical. 5 frames after that, copy and paste the first keyframe. Add some easing to the middle keyframe, but set the velocity influence to 50% for both values, to give it a bit more weight. Now we will animate the trampoline middle path stretching up. 1 frame after the stretch down disappears, add a keyframe to the path shape. 3 frames after that, pull the points to stretch the shape. Keep it symmetrical again, but it doesn't need to be as flat as on the stretch down. Set that keyframe to easy ease. Then 5 frames after that, copy and paste the first keyframe. Now we have the shape bouncing through the trampoline on both sides. 1 frame back, add a keyframe to the trampoline middle down path shape. Then, at the end frame, have it stretching down again, but less than before, just poking out from the bottom. Set that to easy ease. Then copy and paste that keyframe to the start. 5 frames after that, copy and paste the resting keyframe from the contact point. Back down to the trampoline middle layer. 3 frames before that, add a keyframe to the path. 3 frames later, have it stretching up very slightly. Add easy ease. Then, 3 frames after that, copy and paste the first keyframe. It's looking okay. Now we'll do some very subtle animation on the shadow's scale. We want this to move in time with the trampoline middle's position. Set a keyframe with the scale at 100% at the contact point. 5 frames later, at the bottom of the bounce, increase it to around 103. 10 frames later, when the trampoline is stretched up, reduce the scale to 99. Then, at the end frame, back to 100. Then, easy ease all of the keyframes apart from the first one. At the bottom of the bounce, it's stretching a bit too low, so I'm going to move that up a bit. And I also want to move the character down a bit more on that frame. We'll fix the position of the feet now. Back at the contact point, adjust the position of the foot knolls so they're a bit closer together. We're just going to animate the left foot first, then copy and paste those keyframes to the right foot later. keyframe the position and rotation of foot left null at the contact point. 5 frames later, rotate the foot up so it doesn't poke through the trampoline. Keyframe the position too. 5 frames later, move the character null up first so the feet are at the top of the trampoline stretch. Then rotate the foot down to match the shape of the trampoline and keyframe the position too. At the end frame, move the foot to extend the leg out, almost like he's doing the splits, and rotate the foot to point the toes up too. Copy and paste those keyframes to the start. Add easy ease to the start and end keyframes. We also want to adjust the motion path by using the Convert Vertex tool. Select the start and end keyframes and click and drag on the path to add a smooth curve to the top part of the motion. On the frame after the release point, move the foot down slightly so it's almost touching the trampoline, with the toes pointed down. Set those keyframes to easy ease too. In the middle of the movement, on the way up, point the foot down. And at the contact point, point the toes up so the foot is landing on its heel. Then at the middle of the movement down, rotate the toes down slightly. The speed of the foot movement needs adjusting to kick out faster but stay held out a bit longer. So select the first and last position keyframe, edit the keyframe velocity, and set both values to 75%. We also want to offset the timing of the rotation. Now that we're using Character Tool, we can also use this to help with expressions. So let's open that up. In the Assistant panel, there are 3 buttons under the Looper tab for looping keyframes. In Lesson 1, I showed you how to use a loop in expression, and you can just use this button here to automate that. Or this button will add loop out, and this middle button will add loop in and out together. Which one you use depends on your keyframes, but the way that I animate, looping both in and out is usually the best option, as it means you're free to move your keyframes either forwards or backwards in the timeline. So select the foot rotation keyframes and add loop in and out to these. Then select just the first and last keyframe and move these 2 frames later. And this second keyframe 1 frame later, and rotate the foot up a little more. We did this to give the foot rotation a slight delay behind the position when the leg kicks up. Now, we'll animate the position of the body null delayed behind the bounce. So, starting 3 frames after the contact point, set a keyframe on the position. 4 frames after that, move the body down to bend the legs slightly. Then, 4 frames after that, have the character stretching up as much as they can without overextending the legs, which is pretty much the starting pose anyway. 4 frames after that, copy and paste the first keyframe. Add easy ease to the middle 2 keyframes. Now we can copy and paste the keyframes from foot left null to foot right null. Do that for position and rotation. I'll just move the first body null keyframe back 1 frame. And I'm also going to adjust the motion path of the foot. I want it to have a wider arc on the movement down. And I want to reduce the arc on the upper parts of the movement. Copy and paste those position changes from left to right. And on the frame after the release point, I want to move both feet a little lower. Now we'll do some animation on the face. Select the face null. At the start, set the vertical position to -50 and add a keyframe. At the midpoint, change that to 25. Then at the end, copy and paste the first keyframe. Add easy ease to them all. Add a loop in and out expression. And shift them 4 frames later, so it's delayed behind the movement of the body. Now we'll animate the hands. First of all, we need to change the direction that the arms bend. Select the right wrist and change the direction to 100. Select the left wrist and change the direction to -100. We'll animate hand left null first. We want the start position to be up in the air a little. Set a keyframe there. Then change the rotation so it's pointing in the same direction as the arm. And add a keyframe. At the midpoint, move the hand down. And rotate it so it's pointed up even more. At the end, copy and paste the start keyframes. Set the rotation keyframes to easy ease. For the position, we want to add a curve to the motion path like we did for the feet. Select the start keyframe and drag out a handle with the Convert Vertex tool. Select the end keyframe and drag the handle out in the opposite direction, making sure the curve is smooth. And for the start and end keyframes, set the velocity influence to 50%. For the middle keyframe, we'll just do easy ease. Select the position and rotation keyframes and add a loop in and out expression to these. Move the position keyframes 5 frames later, and the rotation keyframes 5 frames after the position. We also need to adjust the position of the elbow. We can do this by selecting the left wrist, and in Effect Controls we can keyframe the midpoint. We want it to be 50% at the start. At the midpoint, make it 25% to move the elbow further out from the body. Then, at the end, copy and paste the first keyframe, and add easy ease to all the keyframes. We'll copy and paste these midpoint keyframes to the right wrist too. Then copy and paste the position and rotation keyframes from hand left null to hand right null. We'll also animate the fingers. Scroll down to the hand left shape layer. Within that, add a keyframe to the path for all the fingers and the thumb at the start of the animation. We want the fingers here to all be spread wide apart, which is pretty much how we set them up to begin with. At the midpoint, we want to make it a closed fist, so pull all of the outer points in towards the hand. At the end, copy and paste the start keyframes, then add easy ease to them all. We'll also add a loop in and out expression to these. And we want to offset the timing of these 5 frames later. It looks okay, so we'll now do the same for hand right. Select all of the finger and thumb paths on that layer. Then copy and paste all of the keyframes from hand left. Now we'll add some animation to the mouth. Go to the start frame, and on the mouth matte layer, we want to animate the path shape and the stroke width. At the start point, we just want to make the mouth as wide as possible. At the midpoint, we want it to be a bit smaller, a bit higher, and with a flatter curve. At the end, copy and paste the start keyframes and add easy ease. In the mouth detail layer, we're going to animate the position of the tongue shape. When the head is tilted up, we want the tongue to be lower down. And when the head is tilted down, we want the tongue to be higher up. At the end, copy and paste the first keyframe and add easy ease. We could stop the animation there, as it's a pretty good loop already, but I find that symmetrical animations like this can look a bit unnatural. You want the movement in your loops to be balanced, but not necessarily with perfect symmetry. To fix this, we're going to repeat the bounce twice, but with slightly asymmetrical animation, which is then mirrored on each bounce. Press U to show all keyframes. To start, we want to make sure that the first and last keyframe on all of our layers are exactly 1 second apart. For those that aren't, we'll add keyframes to the start and end. This should just be the body null position, the trampoline middle path, and scale, and the shadow scale. Now we want to add a loop in and out expression to all of these keyframed attributes. This will be any that don't already have this little arrow next to the stopwatch. Scroll down and select any attributes that don't have this arrow. Then click the loop in and out button. Now we're going to make this a 2-second loop. So drag the end marker out to 4 seconds on the timeline. Move 1 frame back and press N to set the end of the work area. Now if you play the animation, you should have a perfectly looping 2-second loop. Go back to the start frame, and we're going to start by adding some rotation to the body null. Set the rotation to -10 and add a keyframe. At the contact point, 10 frames later, change it back to 0. At the release point, 10 frames after that, set another keyframe at 0. 10 frames later, at the top of the jump, set the rotation to 10 degrees. Back to 0, 10 frames after that. 0 again 10 frames later. Then at the end, copy and paste the first keyframe. For the first, last and middle keyframes, which are all rotated, set these to Easy Ease. Offset just these 3 keyframes by 2 frames. Then add a loop in and out expression. Now we'll adjust the face null position. Copy and paste all of the position keyframes to repeat them. On the first keyframe, change the horizontal position to 15. On the middle keyframe, make that -15. And the last keyframe back to 15. We'll need to adjust the tongue position now too, to match the face movement. Copy and paste those keyframes on the mouth detail layer to repeat them. On the first keyframe, move it 3 pixels to the left to offset the movement of the face. On the middle keyframe, move it 3 pixels to the right. Then the last keyframe, 3 pixels to the left. The hands are okay because they're parented to the body null, but we need to fix the position of the feet. We'll do this first on foot left null. Copy and paste the position keyframes to repeat them. Then go to the first frame and select the first and last keyframe so that we can move the null while changing both keyframes. Move the foot down slightly. Then at the middle keyframe, move it down too, but not as far. Then just look through the movement to make sure the leg never overextends. If it does, adjust the handles on the motion path to reduce the arc of the curve. Do this for the movement on both bounces. It looks okay. So now we'll copy and paste these position keyframes from foot left null to foot right null, but then offset them back by 1 second. Because they're on the opposite side, they need to have the opposite timing. The very last thing we'll do now is add some squash and stretch to the body. Select the body shape layer and show the scale. At the start, keyframe the scale at 100% in both directions. 8 frames later, change this to 95 and 105. 7 frames after that, at the bottom of the bounce, change the scale to 110 and 95. 4 frames later, 95 and 110. 4 frames after that, 105 and 95. And 7 frames after that, at the end of the first bounce, copy and paste the original keyframe. Set all of these to Easy Ease. Add a loop in and out expression. Then offset the keyframes by 3 frames. We need to adjust the hips and shoulders to move with the body shape. Start with the left hip. Set a position keyframe at the same time as the first body scale keyframe, and another one at the last keyframe. Then we need to fix the position at this point in the bounce. So change the vertical position to 160 at this frame. Then, 4 frames earlier, copy and paste the original position. Set all of these to Easy Ease. Add a loop in and out expression. It looks good, so copy and paste these keyframes to the right hip. We'll do the same for the shoulders. Start with the left shoulder. Set a position keyframe at the start and end. Find the frame we need to fix. Change the horizontal position to -175. 4 frames before that, copy and paste the original position. And paste that 4 frames after too. Set all the keyframes to easy ease. Add a loop in and out expression. It looks okay. So let's copy and paste these keyframes to the right shoulder. And there we have a finished bouncing loop, with the same asymmetrical bounce mirrored twice, so the animation still feels balanced without feeling robotic and unnatural. I'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks for watching.